I imagine in my head myself saying this to them. And I think if I tell them this, then they're going to be mad. And if they're mad, then I'll be really uncomfortable. And if I'm uncomfortable, then I won't be okay that they're uncomfortable. So then I'll have to make them comfortable so that I can be comfortable, right? It's this weird contortion of the way that I think about things. And the whole thing is that I'm trying to avoid being uncomfortable. There really is, it's just really, really difficult, right? So the question is, why are we so afraid to be uncomfortable?
Hi there, this is Sarah Kuhn. If you are an INFJ or in a relationship with an INFJ or related to an INFJ in any way, and you want to figure out how they operate, what makes them tick, and how to communicate with them better, this is the show for you. It's called The Quiet Ones. This is a show that deconstructs INFJs, what they are, how they think, how they feel, how they operate, and how they relate to people with other personality types. Whether you have just found out that you're an INFJ or have known for a number of years, there is something for everyone. You will learn more about your personality type so that you understand who you are and understand how you operate in the workplace, in relationships, in your family, and with friends. I want you to walk away from every episode feeling like you have a place of belonging, feeling like you are no longer alone, feeling like you have a place to be heard and seen and understood as you really are. This is a place to connect with other INFJs, to learn and grow and really thrive. I want to give you inspiration and real life strategies that are going to help you figure out how to live your best life every single day. Though INFJs are very rare, you are not alone in this world. You are not the only one who thinks the way that you do and feels the way that you do. Hear from real INFJs just like you.
Hi there. Today I want to talk about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I know no one likes to be comfortable, and especially for us as INFJs, we can see things coming. We can predict when there's going to be something that's uncomfortable. And for the most part, we choose to avoid those situations. We don't want to be in a situation that is weird or awkward, and we know how to fix it, so why would we be, right? If you missed the last episode about INFJ anxiety, I really suggest that you go back and listen to it. It has a lot of good information about fixing these kind of situations. But on this episode, I really want to focus on being uncomfortable. We avoid it so much that we actually have different versions of ourselves for different people that we spend time around. Because a lot of us have different levels of comfort with different people that we know, right? I'm a different person around my parents. I'm different than I am around my friends. In fact, if you put 3 or 4 of my friends together in a room and ask them questions about me, they would probably answer them all differently because I'm that different around each one of them. I'm different around the people that I work with. I'm different around the people that I go to church with. And then I act completely different when I'm at concerts versus when I'm at the grocery store, right? So some of this is normal. Everyone acts different at church, hopefully. Everyone acts different at a grocery store, right? You don't expect people to scream at church, but screaming is totally fine at a concert. It's completely acceptable. And most people are a lot more polite at work than you would be at home because you're more comfortable at home. But for INFJs, we take this to the extreme, right? So like I said, I'm a different person around my friends. With one of my friends, I can be very, very outspoken and very crass. With another one of my friends, I'm very prim and proper. It's almost like I mimic how they are So if they're okay being outspoken and straightforward, then I'm fine being that way too. If they would rather be more laid back and more proper about things, then I'm okay being that way too. Um, with my parents, they kind of know me as the person that I was growing up, right? So that's how they expect me to act. And at work, I'm different as well because I'm very agreeable. I don't want to create too much, uncomfortableness. I don't want to rock the boat. So I'm just very agreeable with everything. But I have to ask myself this question: why can't I be myself around my friends? Do I really even know who I am? I mean, that might be a whole nother podcast episode in itself. That could probably be a book or two or three in itself. I have a story that I want to tell you. This honestly could be two or three of my friends, probably more, because most of my friends, I'm 35, so most of my friends are around that same age. Some of them have kids that are 10 or 15 years old. Some of them have kids that are smaller, and everywhere in between. So this story really isn't about one of my friends. It's kind of a combination of all of my friends, but the same situation happens with all of them. Usually they'll invite me to go out to dinner or to spend time with them in some way. And like I said, they all have kids. So it's usually not like a, hey, do you want to go out to dinner? As in you and me. It's, do you want to join our family and go out to dinner? So it'll end up being me and them and their kids and sometimes their husband too. And it turns into this weird situation that's kind of like a third wheel, but it's almost like a fifth wheel because there's all these other people. And then you go out to dinner, and their kids are like constantly interrupting you, and they want to talk to me, and there's only so many things that you can say when you have kids around. And if their husband is around, there's only so many things that you can say when their husband's around. And some of their husbands don't agree with some of their views about the world. And so that limits what you can say even more. So it really turns into this awkward situation where I just feel like I usually end up sitting there going, I don't know why did I agree to this? Like, what am I doing here? But the thing is that I don't want to say no. I don't want to tell them that makes me really uncomfortable. I don't want to be the one to speak up and say, I don't want to go to dinner with your whole family. I don't want to hang out with everybody. Can you and I just have dinner sometime? Can it just be the two of us? Can we have coffee? I don't know why that's so difficult, but it really is incredibly difficult. And here's the thing. I imagine in my head myself saying this to them. And I think if I tell them this, then they're going to be mad. And if they're mad, then I'll be really uncomfortable. And if I'm uncomfortable, then I won't be okay that they're uncomfortable. So then I'll have to make them comfortable so that I can be comfortable, right? It's this weird contortion of the way that I think about things. And the whole thing is that I'm trying to avoid being uncomfortable. There really is, it's just really, really difficult, right? So the question is, why are we so afraid to be uncomfortable? The only answer that I can come up with is that if someone is uncomfortable, then it doesn't feel safe. It feels to me like something really dangerous will happen. Now, what is really dangerous? Well, to me, the first thing that comes to my mind is that if I say this to my friend, maybe she won't want to be my friend anymore. Maybe she won't want to hang out with me, which, is a form of rejection. which is scary for everybody. But if she doesn't want to hang out with me and be my friend anymore, well, then I won't have any friends because I really don't have that very many friends to begin with. This became really apparent to me not too long ago. I had to have my wisdom teeth taken out, and I needed somebody to drive me home from the dentist. And so I'm going down my list of friends because I had to have somebody drive me home because I had to have anesthesia, right? So I'm going down my list of friends and I'm like, okay, how many friends how many of my friends live around Boston? Not very many. And then I have like 3 or 4 friends that actually live close enough to me to be able to drive me home. And a couple of them have kids. I think all of them around Boston have kids. One of them just had a baby. And, we were still in the middle of COVID. So it's like, she doesn't want to go out, which I understand, with COVID. You don't want a baby to be exposed to that. Another one of them has really small kids. So it's like, I came to the end of the list and I'm like, oh, there's really nobody that I can ask. I had to ask my mom to come from out of state just to drive me home after I had my wisdom teeth taken out, because that was it. There was nobody else left. And thankfully she did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to have them taken out. So when I think about losing one of my friends, I really don't have that many friends to begin with. And if I lose one of them, it's not like losing 1 in 100. It's like losing 1 in 5 or 1 in 6, which is a huge percentage of my friends, right? So something else that I worry about, if I say to her, can we just hang out? I don't want to hang out with your family. Maybe she'll say something that I don't know how to respond to. I like to be prepared. I like to know what's coming. So what if she says something that I don't know how to respond to? That feels super uncomfortable for me, super icky. What if she says something mean or snarky? I have 2 responses to people being mean and snarky. One of them is like, I get hurt and I feel sad, and sometimes I want to cry and I don't know what to say, which is the favorable one. Because the other one is that I get really defensive and really mean very quick. So if she gets mean and then I get mean, then I'll have to apologize, and I'm not very good at apologizing, so that might be the end of our friendship right there. Another option is she could say something that's completely reasonable that I just hadn't considered, but I don't know what to say to that. And the third thing is probably the worst, is that she'll be okay with what I said. But because she's okay with it, then I'll feel guilty for asking her, and I'll feel guilty for making her change her plans. So there really is no win in this situation. It's either just I'm uncomfortable or we're both uncomfortable, right? So for me, I've always just picked the lesser of the 2 evils, which is I would rather be uncomfortable than make everybody else uncomfortable, right? But if we're looking at this from a new perspective and we're trying to be healthy, we're trying to focus on ourselves more, trying to put ourselves at least on the same level that we put everybody else on, we have to find a different fix. So what is the fix? How do you fix this situation? Well, you have to learn to be okay with being uncomfortable. Just because you have this thought that being uncomfortable is icky and gross, that doesn't mean that it's true, right? Just because you think that your friend is going to be uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that she actually will be uncomfortable. Just because you feel guilty doesn't mean that you should actually hold on to that feeling. And just because you feel uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's a terrible thing. It could actually mean something different. What if being uncomfortable is actually a good thing? What if it's a sign that you need to make an adjustment? Instead of thinking about it like it's the end of the world, you could think about it like it's a reminder that you need to take some action. It's not something to avoid, but it's something that can actually help you. So we have this idea that we need to take action. Action is what is going to take you to something different. There's a generally accepted idea that if you change your beliefs, then your behavior will follow, right? You've probably heard this. You have to change the way that you think about food if you want to lose weight, right? You have to motivate yourself to go to the gym. That's talking about changing your beliefs. And once you change your mindset, then your behavior will follow. What if that's backwards though? What if what's actually true is that you have to change your behavior first, and then the beliefs will follow? I think this is especially true for INFJs, and it's certainly been my experience. You have to take action first, because if you don't take action, you'll never get through the thinking process. You'll get stuck in that internal process of how is this really going to work, and I don't have all of the answers, so I need to have all of the answers, right? You won't have the evidence that your mind needs to believe the new thing that you want to believe. You don't have the answers when you're dealing with people. You're never going to have the answers until you actually talk to the people. You can run a million simulations in your head and never come up with the exact thing that they're going to say. So you could spend all of that time thinking through everything that they've possibly said to you and all of how they've reacted to everything that you said to them. And then you could be sitting there in front of them and they could hit you with something out of left field. and you could still be like, oh, I didn't think about that. What do I do now? You have to take the action in order to see exactly what's going to happen. And you're probably going to have to take that action more than once. Because in my experience, if you ask somebody or say, hey, I don't want to go out to dinner with your whole family. If you say that to somebody who's had a really bad day, maybe they had to drive downtown and the highway was super busy and they went to the grocery store and somebody hit them with a cart, and maybe they had to go to 2 or 3 grocery stores. Maybe they found a scratch on their cart, it was just like a really bad day and they're in a bad mood and they're just ready to fight. And then you happen to pick that day to say, hey, could we not have dinner with your whole with your whole family? I mean, that's a really bad day, right? They're probably going to react a whole lot different. Whereas if they would have had a lot calmer day, a lot nicer day, they may have had a different reaction. So you're probably going to have to approach your friends more than once. And each one of your friends is probably going to have a different reaction to the same request, right? You might lose some of your friends in the process. And you're going to have to be okay with that uncomfortableness, right? You have to remember that friendships should be equal. You should get what you need out of a friendship and they should get what they need. And if you're only giving and you're not getting, then it's not a good friendship. There has to be that equal give and take. So maybe that's what you need to clear out some of the toxic relationships that you have, or some of the friends that just aren't really very good friends. I want to go back to the beginning here a little bit and ask another important question. Why are we as INFJs so afraid to ask for what we want? When I asked myself this question, there was a couple of other questions that came up. And one of the first ones that comes up for me a lot, not only just in asking other people for what I want, but asking for what I want out of life, asking for what I want in a job and in other relationships. What if I'm a fraud? What if what I have to share isn't good? What if I think that it's good, but nobody else thinks that it's good? What if I share this story like I did on the last podcast episode about freaking out for a week about not being able to find a parking spot, and everybody points and laughs at me, right? What if I'm the only one who feels this way? My biggest fear is that I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not quick enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not funny enough. Maybe I'm not young enough nowadays. Maybe I don't know enough. Maybe I'm not talkative enough, because I've been told that so many times in my life. I'm also afraid that things won't work out for me because of all these things, or that I don't even deserve the things that I want. This is especially true when it comes to asking for things out of life that I want. Things like a good job and enough money, more than just enough money to pay the bills. Things like a romantic partner. I have this constant problem of I'm just not enough. I don't have that confidence. One of my friends, I'm incredibly envious of her. I met her when I was at my previous job. I had worked there for a few months before she started. And when she came in, she's kind of like a tornado, but in a good way. she's very demanding and very, it's kind of hard to describe. She's demanding, but in a polite way. She just knows what she wants and she always gets it because she doesn't take anything else. So she was the executive assistant to the executive director. So she was the assistant to the highest person in the company. And a lot of times I would watch her because we shared an office. She would talk to people like my boss, and then the executive director, who was my boss's boss. And she always got everything that she wanted. Even if it was, hey, you need to schedule a meeting, and they would be like, okay, let's schedule it at 9. And she'd be like, nope, that doesn't work. How about 10:30? Because of the way that she said it and the confidence that she had, you knew that she meant business, and people wouldn't question her. They would just be like, oh, okay, 10:30 works. That's good. We'll take it. If someone asked her to do something, she didn't have time to do it, or she just didn't want to do it, she would say no. And what was really shocking and surprising to me, I mean, I'm sure that I probably sat there across the room several times with my mouth like hanging open, because she would say no and they would just be like, okay. And they would adjust their lives, their schedules for her. So after I got to know her a little bit better, I asked her, how do you make people do this? It's like they change their whole life. Everything revolves around you. How do you make that happen? And she looked at me like I was insane. And she's like, how do you not do that? She's like, I don't understand. Why would you not do that? Why would you say that you can do something if you can't do it? Why would you agree to a meeting at 9:00 if that didn't work for you? And I kind of sat there and I thought for a minute. I'm like, well, I guess that makes sense. But it kind of goes back to where we started, with being uncomfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to make anybody else uncomfortable. One day I was talking to her. We used to talk about all kinds of different things. And for some reason, we were talking about the Philippines. And she told me that they were in Africa. And I knew sure for certain they were not in Africa. But she said it with so much confidence that it was really hard for me to go, hold please. The Philippines are not in Africa. They're next to China and Australia. And she literally sat there and argued with me for several minutes, and I demanded that she pull it up on Google Maps. And because she was so confident, my confidence just kept getting lower and lower. And I was like sweating, thinking, oh, she's going to pull it up on Google Maps and they're going to be next to Africa and I'm going to look like ridiculous. Even though I knew when she said that, I'm like, no, the Philippines are next to China. They're like between China and Australia. I'm positive. I'm positive, right? That's where they are. So we pull it up on Google Maps and she's like, oh, did they move? I'm like, what do you mean did they move? Countries don't move. What are you talking about? And she's like, oh, I could have swore they were next to Africa. And I'm like, no, they're not next to Africa. And we laughed about it, and I made fun of her about it later and every other time something like that came up. But it really wasn't that big of a deal, you know? I mean, for me, if I would have been the one that was wrong, I would have felt like the worst thing in the whole entire world. I would have been positive that she thought that I was stupid and ridiculous. And why would I even suggest that I know where the Philippines are? But I didn't think that about her. I just thought she was confused about, geography, which is pretty normal. I mean, if you've never been to the Philippines, why would you really know where they're at, right? So why are we so afraid to ask for what we want? There are really two different reasons. The first one is a codependent way of thinking. We play a part almost like we're acting in a TV show for different people because we don't love ourselves enough to ask for more, to even believe that we deserve more. It's such a terrible trap, and I've spent so much of my life in that trap. I want to stop here just for a minute and get in a very shameless plug about a new project that I'm working on that's called INFJ Post. It's a premium newsletter, but it really has a lot more than just a newsletter. I did a whole course on how to figure out self-love, how to get self-love, and you can find it in this project. It's included in the subscription, the whole course is. You get that, plus you get exclusive content that's new every single week. You get access to every book that I've ever written and every course that I've ever done. There's a couple more courses in there. There's one about finding your purpose, and there's one about starting a blog as well. And all of it is just $10 a month. So go and check it out. It's called INFJ Post, and the website address is infjpost.com. There's a link for it in the show notes. Okay, back to the codependent way of thinking. We have to focus on not playing a part with our friends to get out of that codependent way of thinking. We have to figure out how to be kind and genuine without worrying way too much about the other people, but worrying enough. You have to remember that it's not your job to manage everybody else's emotional journey in life. I'm going to say that again because it's probably one of the most important things that I have said so far, especially for INFJs. It is not your job to manage everyone else's emotional journey in life. We spend most of our lives thinking that it's our job to manage everybody else's emotions because we can literally feel what they feel. We know what they're going through, even if we've never been through that. We can feel it. But it's not our job to manage their life. They have to be responsible for their own selves. And you have to be responsible for your own self too. You have to save yourself first. And sometimes that can be the work of a lifetime. It's just like when you're on an airplane and they tell you, if the cabin loses pressure, there'll be oxygen masks that come down from the ceiling. Make sure that you put your oxygen mask on yourself first. You have to have oxygen before you can help anybody else. Okay, so back to why are we as INFJs so afraid to ask for what we want? The second reason is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is this belief that everyone else has more or knows more than you do. And you're afraid that if you start talking, start sharing what you have with the world, start writing a blog, write a book, you're afraid that you'll be exposed as a fraud if you put yourself out there. It's such a common thing for anybody who puts themselves out there. Everyone deals with imposter syndrome, especially people who are really successful. The difference is, though, those people, the people who put themselves out there, are the ones who are able to work through it. They're the ones who are able to push through it and to use that to push themselves forward. We have this idea that in order to be successful, you have to have a certain level of confidence, right? But maybe this is something else that we have backwards too. When I heard this, I thought about applying for a job, especially when you're right out of high school or right out of college. You have absolutely no practical experience, but all of the entry-level jobs, they want you to have 2 to 5 years of experience. I struggled with this for like 3 to 5 years because every single job said that. And I'm like, how does this work? I mean, sure, maybe some people had internships, but most of us, like myself, probably struggled through college with a job at Burger King or Bath and Body Works. And that doesn't really count as practical experience when you're applying for a job as a graphic designer at a large company or as a marketing, well, probably not manager, but as a marketing coordinator. It's not practical experience. Maybe you'll learn some people skills, but you're not going to learn some of the main job points that you need to know. In order to be successful, you have to have a certain level of confidence. That's what they tell you, right? But what if the reverse is true? What if you get confidence by having a certain level of success? What if it's the reason that you're successful? What if it's the thing that pushes you to do what you want to accomplish? What if that's what motivates you to work harder and learn more? It takes you off of the pedestal. It helps keep you humble through the whole process. It's definitely something that helped me. I mean, when I first started my blog, I thought that I couldn't consider myself as a writer. I thought in order to be a writer, you had to have a book. But then the more I thought about that, I'm like, well, how do you write a book without being a writer? Like, you have to be a writer to write a book, right? So you should be considered a writer once you sit down to write, because you're considered a writer while you're writing your first book, right? I think so. So you get to decide when you're a writer. You don't have to be successful to call yourself a writer. You can start with the confidence and watch the success come in once you have the confidence. Why is it so stressful to change these thought patterns? Why is it so stressful to change altogether? Why is it so stressful for me to say to my friends, hey, this doesn't work for me. I really don't want to have dinner with your whole family. Why is it so stressful for me to ask my boss for a raise or to ask him for something that would make my job easier, like a new computer, or to just even ask for help? Why is it so difficult for me to tell my parents that I'm not the same person that I used to be? Why is it so difficult to admit that I don't want to do the type of work that I do anymore, that I want to try something new? And the fact of the matter is that we live in a society where you have a plan. And if you deviate from that plan, well, then it's called quitting. And nobody wants to be a quitter, right? We're taught to do something that's safe, be responsible, be a good friend, be a good little girl. Don't make anyone uncomfortable. I really want to challenge you this week, though. I want to challenge you to be uncomfortable. I want to challenge you to make somebody else uncomfortable, to ask for the things that you need, and to ask for the things that you want. I want to challenge you to take action before you feel ready, before you've changed the belief in your mind, and see what happens. It might be completely different from what you think. And I want to hear how it goes too. I would love to hear your stories. You can email them to me. My email is skuhn@infjwoman.com. It's in the show notes. Or if you feel comfortable, you can send me a voice message on Instagram, which is @INFJwoman. I've been sending voice messages to my friends more and more, and I'm getting comfortable with it. And I like it a lot. I love hearing their voices, especially my friends that I haven't seen in a while. And I would certainly love to hear yours too, if you feel comfortable. I really hope that you have a good week, and I will see you next week.
So you just watched that video, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you want some more amazing information about INFJs, check out these videos right now. I'll see you there.